Joining us now, senior advisor to President Trump, one of his key counselors and his former campaign manager when he ran for president and engineering the Trump victory, did a great job there and managed us through some very tough times during that campaign. And it's going to go down in history as one of the best campaigns at the end ever run in history. And joining us now, senior advisor and counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, great to have you on.
Hey, John, it's my pleasure. Hello to you and your listeners.
Hey, let me just start out by saying that I was there with the campaign, Kellyanne, as you know, before it started, when the time he came on the escalator on down. And I just have to say that when I was chairman of Virginia, your passion for this candidacy was like nothing I'd ever witnessed. And you, more than anybody, really understood the Trump voter, why he won, the issues, his agenda. And as we look at the Trump administration now, Kellyanne, I sleep much better at night knowing that you're in there because you're now one of the few people that really understand why his agenda is so critical to the success of America. How do you get this done every day with a lot of people that are there that didn't necessarily buy into it at the start?
Well, let me just say that 63 million or so Americans voted for President Trump and, by extension, his agenda. They explicitly said we want to do things differently. That if they wanted conventional, there were 16 other or 17 other Republicans in the primaries. There was a very well-qualified, Uber-funded Democratic nominee in Hillary Clinton and that represented the status quo and the safe route, if you will. So it's safe meaning, more, you would explode the deficit and the debt. You would have ISIS known as our, quote, determined enemies, as she famously referred to them instead of radical Islamic terrorism at the convention. You would have higher taxes and an extension of Obamacare, maybe sliding into single payer. So voters explicitly said, I do want a disruptor. I want to go into a different direction, try something new. It's important for us all to remember that President Trump was elected based on an agenda. It's our job in this White House to make sure that that agenda is pushed forward every single day. And to look at what he has said and did on the campaign trail, not just as promises and pledges, but as moral imperatives. It's a moral imperative to make sure the 29 million Americans who were lied to about keeping their plans, keeping their doctors, getting coverage from the last administration, that they somehow have a free market opportunity to do so under President Trump. It's imperative that we reduce the burden on middle-class families and job creators and small business owners in this country by giving them tax reform and tax relief. We have over 200 pages of just the instructions for the simple form that most Americans fill out with their taxes. We have thousands of pages in the code. We spend billions of dollars and billions of hours just trying to comply with this IRS code. And so this is a president that's making good on those promises, restructuring what he sees as unfair, imbalanced, and unequal trade agreements with countries around the globe, bringing back manufacturing jobs. We've got over 100,000 manufacturing jobs created in this country net since the beginning of the year. He's making good on promises. It doesn't always get the coverage, but it's very important that people realize the support that they need to give on the outside as well as here on the inside. It's really important that they hear your voice on the radio, John, that we remember what got Donald Trump elected. It's because he ran on a program and he was able to connect people with issues that nobody else was willing to talk about, like illegal immigration, like trade.
And you're in there fighting for that every day, right?
You got it, sir. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's why I'm here. If you see me in the White House, you could think of the thousands of other places I can be for the millions of dollars. I'm here because I love my country. I feel like I can contribute, and I very much believe in President Trump and Vice President Pence and the agenda that helped them to prevail over two very well quote qualified candidates in Clinton and Kaine by Washington standards with these long government resumes and really gatekeepers of the status quo. But this country wants that upended. And it's our job every single day to plod forward, ignore the naysayers and critics, focus on why we're here, and really subvert one's own ego to the greater good.
Okay, so you're assuring us that your presence in there, and I know some of the others, Hope Hicks, have been there from the beginning, Steve Miller, you're going to keep fighting for the president's agenda. Kellyanne, we appreciate that. A lot of concern of our listeners that are Trump supporters is that why haven't we been able to replace more of the Obama holdovers and get a lot of these open positions in the agencies filled. Why are they still open? What's the holdup?
Well, some of it is statutory. You're right about the holdovers. Some of these are commissions. Most of the political appointees, I'm told, in department by department, agency by agency, and they're all not created equally, of course, but most of them are gone. And I think that you've got to look at the historic, unprecedented obstruction for some of these nominees, including judicial nominees, coming from our own Senate. It is, at this point in President Obama and President Bush's administrations, they had far higher numbers already confirmed and in position. And so many of the folks have been pre-approved. They've been nominated. They're awaiting confirmation hearings. They're awaiting the process to go forward. But I do think it's important for this administration to continue to attract and retain talent that is in line with the president's own thinking. I'd like to go around the White House and remind everyone, and really the administration, and remind everyone that here's the following list of people who were elected to anything. If you don't see your name on the list, get with the program or get out. And the list is Donald Trump and Mike Pence. It's a pretty short list. They were elected to something. The rest of us are here to serve the country and to serve the president and the vice president. And so I think it's a place where tough and smart but humble people survive and thrive. And again, those who are focused. Now, some of my colleagues who did not come into the administration, some who did and are now back on the outside, they've made very clear that they will continue to fight for the president's agenda as well. But from the outside, building communications or political or policy superstructures that help to reinforce and animate the grassroots. But I also want your listeners to remember that we were in the wilderness for at least 8 years, on some issues longer, and how many people were staring down the barrel the prospect of a President Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And wake up every day, John, with a renewed resolve, I think less belly aching, complaining, more resolve, more reinforcements to try to get this agenda done. And appeal to your state legislature, appeal to your governors, appeal to your federal elected officials, because this president has done many things without Congress. Much of his success in the first 7 months has been through Congressional Review Acts, deregulation, signing executive orders that have allowed the coal miners to have their health benefits continued, for example, property owners and taxpayers to get some relief. So he's done things that he could do. The Mexico City policy, for example, through executive action. He now needs the legislature, which is Republican, to come together and help pass these big initiatives. Tax reform, health care reform, if they're willing to go back in, obviously Harvey relief, very much on the president's mind. So we need a Congress that is supportive of the very basic center-right principles and ideas on which they were all elected, by the way. Some of these folks in Congress were all too happy to yuck it up and echo the President Trump message, the Donald Trump message, during the campaign and during their own campaigns. They've been promising their constituents for 7 years they'd repeal and replace Obamacare. President Trump has been here for 7 months, and he's the one who's ready, pen in hand, to make it happen. But nobody should be surprised that he wants to build the wall. He wants Congress to pay for it. He's going to put ISIS in retreat, if not full-on defeat, America's place in the world, cyber security, counterterrorism, renegotiating trade agreements, reducing further illegal immigration, and really protecting the American worker.
We've only got 5 more minutes. I want to get to the tax reform program of the president's, which I believe is going to be the cornerstone right now of 2017-18, because if you can get the economy humming along at 3.5%, it means 10 million new jobs. It means that wages go up by $10 trillion. It means $10 trillion of new revenue coming in to get the debt down. We've been in favor of just getting a clean bill in order to fund the government, to get that out of the way. I understand a lot of people out there don't want to see the debt raised, but it's been raised like 18 consecutive times. Let's just get that done so that we can get real tax reform in this country, which is, we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Is the administration willing to live with a clean bill so that we can try to get real tax reform in the United States that can grow our economy and jobs?
The president's very committed to tax reform. He took his message right to the Lauren Cook Company in Missouri because it was established in 1941. It remains, as many have sort of fled or had to shutter. The Lauren Cook Company in Missouri remains a leading company in the design and manufacturing of fans, blowers, vents, exhaust systems, a real American success story. But to get more Lauren Cook companies up and running, we need systemic, meaningful, consequential tax reform and tax relief, two different things. So the president really has four goals here. One is to simplify. I was saying earlier just how Byzantine and draconian and labyrinth-like the code is. The IRS is among the biggest Loch Ness monsters in the swamp, John. Also, to really reduce the marginal rates and the liability of middle-class taxpayers. A third, to help job creators, to reduce the corporate tax rate so the job creators can keep the jobs here and make themselves more competitive to attract and retain an American workforce here at home rather than shipping those jobs and the wealth overseas. And speaking of the wealth overseas, number 4 is repatriating trillions of dollars in wealth that is legally parked overseas. We want the jobs and the wealth to come back here. So the president and his team have met with over 200 members of Congress, more than 80 organizations representing business and industry, hundreds of executives, small business owners, grassroots organizations, and we feel very optimistic that tax reform can be done this year. We certainly hope, and the president said it in Missouri two days ago, we certainly hope that he can rely upon a bipartisan effort. We hope that those Democratic senators who are up for re-election next year, at the very least, see the light and make good on their promise to loosen the yoke on the backs of the workers in their states and the job creators in their states. As you just correctly said, tax reform should not be seen in a vacuum either. It's a critical piece of boosting the U.S. economy overall. We had great economic news this week in that GDP met the 3%. As the 3% growth rate.
Right.
And that's incredibly important because on the campaign trail and under a hail of criticism by other Republicans and others across the political spectrum, John, candidate Trump was criticized for daring to say we have to get back to 3% growth and we can do it. He's already achieved that in the first few months on the job. We've been settling for this anemic growth. We had over 3% growth for decades, but since 2007, it's been languishing far below 3%. So he just, the goal is to have sustained 3% plus growth. That also means chipping away at the regulatory framework. It means unleashing energy independence, all of which he's been doing. It all works together. But we need everybody's, if people just go out there and say, I don't know if we can get tax reform done, you're talking like a loser. You got to think like a winner and say we deserve this. It's an imperative to give Americans a pay raise and to make their jobs more secure and better paying, and also that's across different industries. Let's incentivize those would-be entrepreneurs to take their investment and their dreams off the shelf and put them into practice. So that begins with tax reform.
So, Kellyanne, do you think the White House's strategy of turning the tax reform bill over to Paul Ryan and have it go through a regular order is better than if you had somebody carrying a specific bill like Perdue and Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas have the RAISE Act? I mean, you're turning this over to Ryan and regular order. That didn't work out too well with repeal and replace. What confidence do we have that they're actually going to come up with something that mirrors what the president has requested?
The president is meeting with the leaders of both parties next week in both chambers, and I'm sure there are many things on his mind, on his agenda. And top of the list, obviously, would be Hurricane Harvey, recovery and rebuilding, but tax reform is right in there. And it stands to reason that we want the grassroots across this country to remind its leaders and its elected officials what they campaigned on as well and what we must have. So the president, we've been waiting for Congress to get back. They've been on quite an extended vacation. And when they come back, all of these mechanisms will be sorted out. But make no mistake, the president has said when it comes to Harvey funding, for example, that he wants swift action and he wants to make sure that money gets to the people in need. Let's talk about the vehicles to do that. On tax reform, these are his major governing principles. These are his goals. He said it in a speech almost a year ago at the New York Economic Club. It was September of 2016, creating 25 million jobs over 10 years and how to do that.
Right.
So nobody should be surprised. They just need to get with the program.
All right. Well, we're very confident that you're in there. You're at the helm. I want to thank you for your time today, Kellyanne. We're out of time. I also want to thank you personally on the air for the opportunity you gave me, allowing me to be your chairman of Virginia, although we didn't bring you the
we'll win
election
Virginia
back.
next time.
We'll win it next time. But I thank you for that opportunity.
And thank you. Thank you for helping us in the Commonwealth. God bless you. Take care.